All the problems are still there, you know. You see your whole life go by right before you die. I don't think I'm dead yet. When you hear the name Jon Bon Jovi, what do you think of? Well, you probably know him as the famous singer from the rock band Bon Jovi. But what you probably don't know is that behind all the fancy stuff of being a famous rock star, Jon has been dealing with something really sad and scary all along. From the very start, Jon has had to deal with lots of hard times, not just in his personal life but also in his job. But it's safe to say that none of these hard times have ever been as personal and deep as his recent health problem and sad diagnosis. What terrible sickness has the famous Jon Bon Jovi been told he has? Come with us as we look at the sad details. Jon's early fights with being told no and being really tired. Jon Bon Jovi was born John Francis Bon Jovi Jr. back in 1962 in New Jersey. He grew up in a working-class family. His dad cut hair and used to be a Marine. His mom was also a former Marine. Right from when he was little, Jon really loved music. He loved to sing and play music, and he would always try out for talent shows and music contests at his school. By the time he was a teenager, everyone around him could see that he was really good at music. In 1974, Jon started playing in local bands. He made his very first band that same year, which he called Rays. When he was 16, he made another band called Atlantic City Expressway. David Bryan joined him there, and David would later become part of the famous Bon Jovi band. But even though he was really talented, there was a problem. Making it big in the music world wasn't easy at all. In the early 1980s, Jon tried really hard to get record deals, but nobody wanted to sign him. So many record companies told him his music wasn't good enough or that rock music already had way too many bands. Can you imagine how awful this must have felt for Jon, who was trying so hard to make it in the music business? Well, the good thing is that Jon wouldn't give up. He really believed that he could make it big in the business, so he decided to work really hard to make his dream come true. Do you know that Jon worked as a janitor at a recording studio in New York, cleaning floors while hoping that someday his songs would get noticed? He took lots of different jobs just so he could pay his bills and be ready for the day he would finally get his big chance. And it finally happened. One day he recorded a song called Runaway and talked a local DJ into playing it on the radio. The song became a hit, and suddenly the producers and record companies that once ignored him started paying attention. This was Jon's first big success, but while this felt like a dream come true, it was the start of many more problems to come. Jon decided he wanted to make a band, so he reached out to the best musicians he knew. Keyboard player David Bryan, bass player Alec John Such, drummer Tico Torres, and guitar player Richie Sambora. Together they became Bon Jovi. They hit the road playing anywhere and everywhere, determined to make a name for themselves. But the journey was far from easy. In an interview, Richie Sambora, the guitar player, explained that during the band's early days they went through a lot of hard times. His words were, "When we were making the Fahrenheit record, we were all living in the same apartment in Philadelphia, sleeping on the floor when it was 12 degrees below zero outside. The heat wasn't working well, and there wasn't much food in the refrigerator." But even though they went through hard times early on, the band kept going and continued making music. By the time they put out their second album, Slippery When Wet, in 1986, they had become so popular that they could be called global superstars. Bon Jovi was everywhere, on magazine covers, TV shows, and sold-out world tours. Everywhere they went, stadiums were packed and their songs were at the top of the charts. But behind all the success, cracks were starting to form. Tensions were getting worse, and the music industry itself was changing. For almost 10 years, Bon Jovi had been running at full speed. After the huge success of New Jersey, they went on a really tough world tour that lasted from 1988 to 1990. The tour had over 230 concerts across many continents, and this meant there was barely a moment to rest. Every night they performed in front of thousands of screaming fans, giving everything they had on stage. But off stage, being really tired was creeping in. As you can already imagine, with the fame came lots of pressure. And although this pressure was felt by the whole band, Jon felt it even more because he was not just the founder who had brought them all together, he was also the main singer of the group. Jon felt a deeper sense of responsibility towards the band, and he became a little too hard on himself. Things got so bad that by the early 1990s, Jon had become physically and emotionally worn out. He was constantly performing, writing songs, and managing the band's business. The endless cycle of touring and promoting left him completely exhausted. At one point, he was so tired that he could hardly work. It wasn't just about how his body felt, it was the emotional weight as well. The pressure to stay on top, to keep making hit songs, to keep up the image of a rock legend, it never stopped. But even though Jon felt exhausted, he felt like he couldn't stop. Fans expected more, the record company wanted new music, and so he and the band decided to keep going. But what fans couldn't see was that the exhaustion building up inside him had reached a dangerous level. Things got so bad that Jon began to feel emotionally empty. He even began to think about hurting himself. As a matter of fact, in 1991, when driving on the Pacific Coast Highway on his way to see a psychologist, he thought about jumping out of the moving car because of how much emotional pain he was in. Looking back on that dark time in his life, he said, "I was as low as I could imagine myself being. I was out in California, drinking, being miserable, wanting to seek help and thinking about jumping out of my car when I was driving. I was a mess. It took everything out of what I loved until I took control. It sucked. Then one night it happened." Jon took the stage as he always did, full of energy, ready to give the audience a show they would never forget. The music was blasting, the crowd was electric, and everything seemed normal. But as the concert went on, something felt wrong. His body wasn't responding the way it usually did. His legs felt heavy, his breathing was harder than usual, and his head was foggy. He tried to shake it off, telling himself he just needed to push through. But the exhaustion that had been building for years had finally caught up with him. In the middle of the show, Jon's body gave out. He felt himself slipping, and before he knew it, his team was rushing toward him. He had collapsed, unable to continue. Security and crew members carried him off the stage, and the music stopped. The audience, confused and worried, watched as their rock hero was taken backstage. Backstage, medics checked his pulse, trying to help him recover. But his body was completely drained because he had given too much for too long without rest. After that night, Jon had to face the truth. He wasn't unbeatable. His body needed time to heal. The years of pushing himself to the limit had finally caught up with him. It was a wake-up call, and he finally realized he had to slow down before he lost everything. When the tour finally ended, the band members took a little break to rest. For the first time in years, they had space from one another. But the emotional toll of constant work had already taken effect. The damage had been done, and some members of the band started questioning if they could continue at this pace. And this was the beginning of more heartbreaking cracks in the band. Band fights and almost breaking up. Even though they took a break from touring, the band was far from relaxed. Unfortunately, the years of working non-stop had created so much hidden tension that even after they took a break from the intense touring, the damage had already been done. Jon Bon Jovi, the frontman of the band, and Richie Sambora, who had been musical partners for years, shocked the fans and the general public when they began to have a terrible fight, which apparently came from the pressure, exhaustion, and creative differences. You see, Jon Bon Jovi and Richie Sambora actually met in the early 1980s. Jon had the vision, the drive, and the ambition to make it big, while Richie had the raw talent and guitar skills that took the music to another level. Together they built Bon Jovi into one of the biggest rock bands in history. For years they were unstoppable. They wrote songs together, toured the world, and lived the ultimate rock star life. Fans loved their bond. It wasn't just a singer and a guitar player, it was like they were brothers. But as the years went on, cracks started to appear behind the scenes. Jon and Richie were clashing. Jon had always been the leader of Bon Jovi. He made the big decisions, handled the business side, and took control of the band's direction. Richie, on the other hand, while he was part of the music, often felt like his voice wasn't being heard as much as it should be. There were also personal struggles. Richie had battled substance abuse problems, and although he eventually beat them, the pressure of touring and performing took a toll on him. He wanted more time with his daughter Ava, and he was starting to feel burned out. Meanwhile, Jon, who was equally exhausted, was still bent on pushing full speed ahead. He wanted to keep the band moving, keep making albums, and keep touring. He wasn't slowing down for anything. That difference in priorities started to create serious tension. In 2013, Bon Jovi was in the middle of their Because We Can tour. Fans were excited to see them perform, expecting the same magic they had always brought to the stage. But then out of nowhere, Richie was gone. He didn't show up for a concert in Calgary, Canada. No announcement, no explanation, just silence. Fans were confused. Was he sick? Was it a last-minute emergency? No one knew. Then the shocking and heartbreaking truth came out. Richie had quit. At first there were rumors that he had been fired. Others thought he had relapsed into substance abuse. But Richie later explained that he simply couldn't do it anymore. The constant touring, the pressure, and the strain on his personal life had become too much, and he needed to step away for his own mental health and general well-being.